Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is December 15th, 2020. The year is coming to an end. Many of us are going to be happy to see this year go. But who knows? Maybe this will be better than next year, and we'll be looking at this as fondly the year we wanted to continue living in. I doubt that very much. But anyway, we have a great show for you today. Of course, today is Tuesday, so we have the BluePrint Power Hour. Coach Rob and I answer your questions. None of the questions are off topic. We like to talk about training, nutrition, drugs, supplements, things like that. But people ask us questions quite diverse, sometimes much broader than those topics. So feel free to do that. And the place to do it is right here on Facebook or YouTube, where you are watching live. I'm actually unlocking YouTube. I found out later this week that unless I go to YouTube and switch the primary link back to public instead of friends only, I don't see a lot of the comments that people make. So we'll be able to see all of your comments today. Doing it right now. Before we get started, of course, I have to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods. The website is shrnetwork.biz/legendary. The code is SHR10 to save 10% off everything there. They have such great stuff there. If you haven't been there, like if you've been listening to me say this at the beginning of every show, but you just don't think it's interesting to you, you have to go to Legendary's website, shrnetwork.biz/legendary. They have seasoned almonds that are the best in the world. And I'll tell you why they're the best, because their almonds are the freshest. One thing about Ron Penna, and we learned this from Quest, he is a stickler when it comes to raw materials, and he only gets the best. And in this case here, he gets the best almonds you've ever had. They taste like almonds. So many almonds don't even taste like almonds anymore. And then Shannon Penna comes up with these amazing blends of spices and seasonings that she puts on them. Their seasoned almonds are unbelievable. Their nut butters are unbelievable, and no sugar in their nut butters. And, of course, the snack that's taking the world by surprise is their tasty pastry, which is basically a Pop-Tart with 0 sugar, in the case of the 2 new flavors, blueberry and hot fudge sundae, 15 grams of high leucine protein, no gluten, and not a ton of fiber. I've grown so tired of too much fiber in snack foods. And I think a lot of people are starting to notice that as well. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10, not only to save 10% off on some of the best snacks you'll ever have, but also to let them know that you heard about them here on Superhuman Radio. And without further delay, let's line up Rob's music here and play that.
Calling all BluePrint Army. Fall in line. It's time for the BluePrint Power Hour with Coach Rob Regish on the Superhuman Radio Network.
How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing well, although I'm awful cold. It is 35 degrees here in wonderful Massachusetts, and it's just going to get colder. I guess we got a storm on the way, but we'll see.
Yeah, New York is getting hit with it already, downstate New York. So that means It's on your radar too. And interestingly enough, this morning it was 24 degrees here in Louisville.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow.
I had a really good conversation with a good friend of mine. We both ride. And I said, when I was in New York and in college, I was living in South Ozone Park, Queens. I was going to school downtown Brooklyn at the City University of New York. And there were days where it was the middle of winter, December, January, February.
Yep.
And we had snow, but the snow plows came through the streets and cleared the snow away. And the main thoroughfares like Atlantic Avenue and the highways, they were just fine. They were dry by the morning, typically from the road being dried by cars. I would ride my motorcycle to school because I didn't have a car and I didn't want to take the A train. And I remember that I used to have to cover my face with a bandana because the hair in my nose would freeze every time I inhaled. And tears, I just wore sunglasses. Tears would run down the sides of my eyes towards my ears and freeze into little icicles on my face. And I said to my buddy Billy, I said, I have a rule now, 48 degrees or more, I'll ride. But back then, I didn't even pay attention. I didn't even check the weather. I just knew the streets were rideable, and I would go out. And I'm sure I was riding in 25 and 30 degree weather back then.
Did you see anyone else riding a motorcycle? No. And I'm that's sure hardcore, man. But hey, you didn't have a car, right?
I didn't. And I didn't want to take the A train because it took me literally 20 minutes real time to get to school on my bike versus an hour and a half on the A train.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway. We have some exciting news about the BluePrint Bulletin, right? You still
yes. And look, being the time of year that it is, why not give yourself something that you really want instead of depending upon folks and perhaps not getting something that you really want? I'm talking about the BluePrint Bulletin. People ask me all the time. They say, "Hey, I love the BluePrint Power Hour. What is the BluePrint Bulletin?" And I tell them. It's everything we discuss here on the show. Plus, right, I got to save the absolute best stuff. And I do for my subscribers. But people, of course, are, they're skeptical. Money's tight. It's been tough out there. That's no secret. So what we are doing is this. We have a special now where for less than $5 a month, you can get the first 3 months of the BluePrint Bulletin for just $4.99 a month. Which is an incredible deal. Full 90 days to check it out. You also get instant access to the entire library. All right, so we're talking over 100 issues now. In addition to that new issue, you'll be getting every month. And you get 2 freebies here. One is the Fast Fat Loss Report, which is, look, this time of year, it's no secret. A lot of people struggle, right, with putting pounds on. This is a really interesting little report that will clue you in on both the stimulant and the non-stimulant fat burners out there and where to find them, which is interesting in and of itself. And then finally, if even before buying, if you want to check this out, we are giving you a free sample issue so that you can see for yourself what I put into this, what the BluePrint Bulletin is like, and what kind of value you will receive in exchange for that real pittance of a price. So now we have a special URL, right?
Yeah, the URL is shrnetwork.biz/coachrob. Right. And once you're there, you use the code SHR5. The code is also on the top of the page, so you can't forget it. And you pay for all 3 months in one shot. You pay $14.99, and you have access to it for 3 months, possibly 3 of the most important months to have access to this, because let's be honest, I'm living proof. I haven't trained in 3 weeks. And it's not because of the holidays. It's because the move and my gym and the COVID. So doubling down on information that could help you, if not gain muscle and lose fat, not gain any fat and lose muscle. Yeah. During this next 30 to 60 days. This is gold. This is gold. For $14.99, get 3 months of it.
And I'm really excited about next month's issue. I'll be debuting a new training system that I think is it's motivating me to get in the gym and do my thing because of the results that I'm seeing. And I know when people see this, they're going to love it. Whether they choose to do it right by itself, or use a little bit of it to sprinkle in their training to to jazz things up, which frankly is something we all need every so often.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's get to the first question. The first question, hold on, let me just scan up here. The first question comes from Mike Graham. He says, I'm going to use ecdysterone soon, but wanted to know the best kind to get. Let's say I wanted ecdy by itself. I've thought of this too, just buying raw powder. Other than Raponticum, which herb should I be looking for?
It's a popular question. It's one I get a lot. If I want to get ecdy just by itself, what should I be looking for? So most people are familiar with the fact that I prefer and recommend full spectrum Raponticum. The reality is that there are a small handful of other plants that contain enough ecdy to make them worthwhile. And so these range from herbs grown in Russia to Bulgaria to South America and elsewhere. Now, much depends, however, whichever one you choose, much depends on which ecdysterone that you are looking for, or whether you want the full spectrum stuff that I talk about so often. If, for example, you're looking for 20-hydroxyecdysterone, that can be extracted from a number of sources. Everything from the quality stuff, which Raponticum is what I recommend, but you're also going to see it derived from Cyanotus vaga, Cyanotus arachnoides. There's another Cyanotus source genus that, frankly, it's not recommended. There are no human studies. There are no studies, period, behind Cyanotus. And something else that I learned about Cyanotus recently, there are no toxicological studies on it. So whereas we have that data on many other plants showing incredible safety with respect to the ecdysterone content and the rest of it, that doesn't exist in Cyanotus. So up until recently, I didn't know that, but it's just another black mark, right, on Cyanotus and ecdy from such. Other plants, Ajuga turkistanica is a good one. And believe it or not, something called Vitex. There are several strains of Vitex, which is traditionally marketed towards women. And, PMS relief, they actually contain some ecdysterones. Now, ecdy is also present. You might see this in the market in fungi, various strains of fungi. I've only seen one company that sources ecdy from fungi. It's not a good proposition, in my opinion. I have seen, much like Cyanotus vaga, the research isn't there like it is on other plants. If you're looking for turkesterone, it is naturally present in Raponticum, but not in really commercially viable amounts. For that, you want Ajuga turkistanica. Okay. If you want Turk, that's where to get it. Brazilian suma is also an acceptable plant source, and it includes rare things, uranium, which has, in some studies, been shown to oxygenate tissues, along with, believe it or not, several amino acids and other beneficial compounds. It is naturally spinach and quinoa, although to eat a lot of both, right, to get enough. Unfortunately, on the suma, quality suma is very rare, right? There are a ton of 5-to-1 junk extracts that you're going to find out there that don't do anything. There is one 25-to-1 suma extract on the market, and its trade name is Ultra Suma. If you can find that, especially in isolation, by all means, grab it. It's good stuff. Otherwise, I still stand by the Raponticum, right, recommendation. More and more, I am convinced that is due to several of the ecdysterones, in not just one, that have these pretty powerful lowering of blood sugar effects. And anyone that's used enough of that good Raponticum, 500 milligrams a day or more, and they've got blood work done, right, that looking at fasting blood sugars, they're going to tell you the same thing. I have had a dozen guys in the last year email me and say, hey, I heard you talking about that, and I got on the XYZ product, and sure enough, man, my blood sugars are, 20, 30 points lower. 20, 30 points is a lot.
That's huge.
And I see that 20,
I
30,
don't even think metformin does that.
that 20, 30 point drop is something that I see too. I didn't know if I was an anomaly. I guess I'm not, because these other guys tell me about it. And that's important. Why is it important? Well, not just from a general health perspective, right? Lower blood sugar, but when we look at fat loss, right? Especially this time of year, we're looking for things that are going to help us. Well, we hear a lot about thermogenics. We hear a lot about, stimulants. We hear a lot about even some non-stimulants and appetite suppressants, yada, yada. But the tie that binds in every successful fat loss study that I've seen, whether it's low carb, low protein, low calories, or what have you, is low blood sugar and consequently low to steady insulin levels.
Yep.
Personally, I think I've been looking at a couple of different combinations of ecdysterones to see if they lower blood sugar better than just the full spectrum Raponticum or this ecdy or that ecdy. I have some promising data around that. And I'll tell you this, one way or another, it's going to make it into my next product, which will be a female fat burner, right? Fat burner for women. Now, that doesn't mean it won't work in men, but it is being designed and will be marketed more so to the fairer sex. So
yeah, because they're the ones that step on the scale every day, and they're the ones that go, I'm never going to eat again. The scale is up a half a pound. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I talk to some of Jen's friends. I talk to women in the gym, and it's just like you said, even none of them sleep, right? Which is another question I asked them. But just to illustrate the mentality, I had more than one tell me, if I have to go sleepless, I'd rather see the pounds on the scale go down first, without even getting a good night's sleep. So if they're going to choose between the two, that's what they do. So why not go in that direction, right?
I think it's funny when men talk about, oh, I'm up 2 pounds, and women are like, I don't understand why you're excited. Oh, no,
Right.
Probably muscle. At least some of it's muscle. It's like, yeah, but why are you excited? Yeah. Dave Hartnett posted this when I was talking about the Legendary Foods tasty page. He says, those blueberry ones are amazing. My issue is I ate the whole box in one sitting. Dave, in Italian, we would call you a gavone, and I would call you my gavone brother, because I do the same thing. I can't keep this stuff in the house. Elise is so good. Elise will have one. And then later on in the evening, I'll say, hey, you want a tasty pastry? And she'll say, no, I already had one today. I'm like, what? So you can't have no.
How many are there to a box?
I think it's 10. I'm not sure. I think it's 10. It's a considerable number. It's not like 5.
Yeah, no, yeah. That's cool.
But yeah, I'm the same way. I'm a gavone. I eat it until it's gone. That's how I decide when to stop, when there's no more to eat. The next question comes from Alex Wright. He says, what do you make of super slow training? I saw someone using it in the gym the other day, and wondered whether it was worth trying.
Yeah, well, super slow really brings up, the issue is really this, right? Rep tempo, how quickly or slowly that you move the weight, and associated time under tension. And from what have seen from being in this game for many years, is manipulating either one of those has gone in and out of style several times over the last 35 years or so that I've been.
And I've never seen anyone except maybe Joshua Trentin, who's built significant muscle continuously on a super slow program.
Yeah. And that's, believe it or not, that's part of my answer, because when it was really popularized back in the 90s, I actually did it, but I'll get there in a second. But what we're talking about here is for most super slow protocols, most of them are talking about slowing the negative part of the movement down. But super slow in its strictest interpretation advocated both the positive and the negative as being super slow. Now, I can't recall the exact name, but there was a book written in the early to mid 90s advocating the super slow philosophy. I bought it, I read it, parts of it made sense to me. So, of course, I tried it. And if I recall correctly, I did so for about 4 months. And I want to say I was using a 6-second negative as well as a 6-second positive.
That is
and so,
slow. That's slow.
Yeah. So here are the things I remember. Number one, you needed obviously to drastically lower the amount of weight that you were working with. Number two was that it was some of the most painful training I have ever done, in that the burn during those reps was excruciating. I think it was the positive portion that was worse than the negative. Number three was that I didn't grow any faster. And that number four, upon resuming the classical barbell lifts, bench, squat, deadlift, I was dramatically weaker. Now, as with all training methods, there's a kernel of truth in super slow. So it is true, for example, that time under tensions of anywhere from 40 to 60 seconds seem to favor hypertrophy more so than these, very short duration sets. But think about it. You can get there in far better ways. So here's what I'm talking about. If you perform a 4 to 5 second negative, but then you lift the weight as fast as possible in the concentric in 1 to 2 seconds, that gives you roughly the same 6 seconds under tension. But instead of teaching your central nervous system to be slow, you're training system and muscles to be fast and explosive. The slow concentric, by the way, coupled with the dramatically lowered tension that was on the bar, likely explains why my big lifts tank so fast when I return to them. I couldn't believe how much weaker I was. I really couldn't. It may also explain why I didn't grow any better, right? Despite the fact that my time under tension was greater with super slow. Finally, consider this, right? Just put our critical thinking caps on, as you like to say. The guys at Westside Barbell, they lift insane amounts of weight. And whether it's the max effort method or the dynamic effort method, their muscles aren't under tension for a long, long time, right? Seconds. And they damn sure don't train to be slow. In quite the opposite, in fact, right?
Awesome.
Dynamic effort days or speed. Last time I checked, those boys were sporting plenty of muscle and strength, more than most bodybuilders. So here's the bottom line. If you take anything from super slow, tack a few seconds onto your eccentrics maybe. If you shoot for a 5-second negative, most people will count fast, frankly, and wind up at 3 seconds, which is about right, in my opinion, insofar as the best compromise between strength and hypertrophy. Bottom line, I didn't grow any better and I got a lot weaker, and it was just it left a real bad taste in my mouth.
Do you think that there's a place for it once in a while, like to throw it in here and there?
Maybe in people that are rehabbing an injury. Yeah. I otherwise I just can't see where the benefits are. And there are a dramatic number of negatives, too many in my book to repeat that.
Later in the show, if you can stick around to the top of the hour at 2 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be interviewing a doctor who has discovered through a study from Washington State, the great land-grant university, Washington State University. They do a lot of work there when it comes to agricultural implications. They show in a study that exposure to glyphosate changes men's sperm that causes transgenerational epigenetic diseases. So we're talking about your children, your children's children, their children, they're all 5 generations deep. You know, we've been told for years that glyphosate is safe by all of the talking heads out there that are on the payroll. Well, it's not only not safe, but your exposure to it now has implications to future generations. And they're going to use that to predict disease states. So there's a happy ending to the story, but it's not a happy ending for the people who end up with the diseases. Ken Jugan says, I keep hearing the term feed efficiency thrown around. What is it, and is it anything worth pursuing?
Yeah, the term feed efficiency in bodybuilding usually refers to more of the calories you eat being steered, if you will, toward muscle and away from fat. The term nutrient partitioning became a very powerful marketing term, although at the time few understood what it really meant. It was used, if you'll recall, to great effect by Bill Phillips and Dr. Scott Connolly back in the mid-90s when Metrex was all the rage. But the term feed efficiency does show up elsewhere, such as veterinary medicine. And there you can find it mentioned frequently when discussing experiments or studies done in livestock, right? For example, that's where I found, frankly, TMG, trimethylglycine. You can go back, this was 1997, 1998, when I started beginning to experiment with TMG. And for the simple reason, I had seen several veterinary studies showing that it improved what they called feed efficiency. So think about it. If you're a farmer or you're raising cattle, if you can get an animal to grow on, 6,000 calories a day instead of 10, and be leaner when it gets to market, and therefore you can command a greater price, you've just saved yourself and made yourself a ton of money. So that's where feed efficiency will show up. Another case in point, anabolics were the original and probably ultimate feed efficiency compounds. Prior to even that, though, if we think about it, Vince Gironda noted that more calories could be eaten without getting fat when people eliminated carbohydrates from their diet and instead ate fats and proteins. So understand that whether it's manipulating food, whether you're adding a powerful drug like D-bol, or you're just rearranging macros or using supplements, yeah, feed efficiency, I do think, is a real phenomenon. I'm going to give you one of the best right now, though, and it's absolutely free. Increasing your feed efficiency. Sprints. Get yourself onto the track twice a week and perform some sprints at top speed, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. On the same food, your waistline is going to be a lot trimmer. Sprints are quite likely the best training that you can do, I think, to maximize every morsel of food that crosses your lips. And sprinters' physiques are proof positive what I'm saying is true. You can find bodybuilders, yes, that are extremely lean after a 16-week diet, but the rest of the year, they're not so lean. You're never going to find a out of shape sprinter or a fat sprinter. They just don't exist, or they don't cut it. I mean, you're either lean, strong, and fast, or your career in sprinting is over. Find something else to do. So watch any sprinter and how they train. Speaking of how they train, it's not just sprinting. Some of the best perform heavy squats immediately prior to their race. And then they sprint faster and faster. Likely, why? Because of central nervous system excitation. It's like putting a donut on a baseball bat, right? Swinging 10 times and then taking it off. You can be a lot faster and a lot more powerful when that donut comes off. And these are not, sprinters, these are not fat people, right? Nor are they wispy, though, like marathon runner. And they look like that because they're training steers more of their calories towards muscle and away from fat, or burns existing body fat stores more efficiently. So yeah, feed efficiency, is a real phenomenon. But it's my opinion that the right training and the right macros are almost certainly the most powerful way to maximize every morsel of food that you eat. Steer it towards as much towards muscle and away towards fat. It's always a combination of the fundamentals. It's never, you know what, I'm just going to eat like crap. I'll train haphazardly and take TMG. No, that's not going to work. But that's feed efficiency.
I'll tell you something else. There's something I like to call protein efficiency. Certain proteins are better digested and assimilated than others. Dairy and egg are king of the hill.
Yes.
Soy sucks. Pea protein is okay. Soy protein is terrible because your body is actually designed not to absorb the soy protein because soy contains a trypsin inhibitor, and trypsin is the enzyme your body has to make to digest soy protein. That's why people get gassy when they eat a lot of soy protein. It's digesting in your colon. But when it comes to protein efficiency, egg and dairy, king of the hill.
Right.
Even better than beef and chicken.
Right. So whereas soy is biological value 74, a whole egg is 100.
Right.
That's feed efficiency.
Yeah.
Do you want to have to eat 30%? Right. 30% more soy just to get the same nitrogen retention
We got a break. When we come back, we have a question about Doug Brignoli's training from Robert Thompson. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. We just did a show with Doug. He's a phenomenal guy. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the Blueprint Power Hour. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000. Or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ads today. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said that all disease begins in your gut. That's why it's so important to protect yourself with a boosted immune system. If you drink coffee, tea, smoothies, or really any beverage in the morning, and you're looking for a tasty way to start your day and defend yourself against harmful bacteria, then I have just the thing for you to try. It's called the Ultimate Immunity Protection Stack, and it was put together by my friends over at Bioptimizers. Their immunity stack has 3 products which contain over 18 natural herbs and probiotic blends formulated to fight and and eliminate bad bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and repair compromised gut lining. It also includes psychobiotics, which help increase serotonin and happy chemicals to naturally elevate your mood, performance, and cognitive function with no side effects or dependencies. It's a great addition to your morning routine, and it tastes amazing. Just stir it into any beverage, sip, and enjoy. It's the ultimate way to boost your immune system right before the holiday season. Go to shrnetwork.biz/protect and use code SHR10 and save an extra 10% off on the. You won't find this deal or stack anywhere else. For fast shipping and the best deal, go to shrnetwork.biz/protect today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
I had my microphone open during the break. I'm sure everybody heard me laughing. Ben Greenfield just sent me the best happy anniversary video. We'll play it on the show Friday. But he's a pisser. I love the guy. He's really great. Anyway, let's go back and answer a question from somebody in the audience, and that is Robert Thompson. He says, what are your thoughts on Doug Brignoli's training, eschewing compound exercises for strictly isolation movements?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, of course.
I'll admit, this is the first time I've heard his name, and I'm not familiar with what he's basing this on. It does look like, from the little bit that I Googled during the break, that he's put a lot of thought into it. And I'll reserve judgment until I hear him on your episode. I can only give you the benefit of my experience and with compound versus isolation exercises. I never put any substantial muscle on with isolation work. I put a lot on with big compound heavy lifts, and with the exception of one arthritic right elbow, which may be because of baseball. 35 years later, I don't have any substantial, really, injuries. Now, can you work a muscle efficiently with an isolation exercise? Well, a lot of that depends. Depends, I think, on what the exercise is, where the lever arm is, how much tension you can or can't generate, with that muscle. But I would be surprised to hear from basically anyone that came to me and said, you know what, I built my body, all this muscle, with isolation only exercises. And maybe that's not his argument. I don't know. Maybe he just thinks there's more of a place for isolation work. But until I hear his entire spiel, I'll reserve judgment.
So it comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? Can you, first of all, if you're lean, you look bigger. This is a fact.
Yep.
And if your goal is to be lean and as muscular as you possibly can without actually having to risk injury or work hard, then Doug Brignoli has a really good training style for you, because you can achieve maximum muscle activation with using light weight, but you're never going to be a mass monster. You're not. You can't.
That's probably why my opinion is what it is now.
No. I mean, like Doug Brignoli's got a great training style. If you're somebody who's achieved a level of physique that you enjoy, and you just want to maintain it, You're not really looking to put on more. He's got the way to do it, because you can get in and out of the gym and still have energy. He manipulates angles, and he manipulates geometry, and he manipulates things to hit the muscle to its fullest in its full range.
Yeah.
But you're never going to see somebody train a Doug Brignoli style training and then go compete, in the bench press, deadlift, and squat. Right. Because that muscle activation, while your muscles will get stronger, I don't want people to say, oh, no, you can get strong. No, you can get stronger, but they're never going to work in unison the way you want them to work, let's say to squat 600 pounds.
Right.
So, it just depends on your goals. If your goals are to have a big bench, a big squat, and a big deadlift, you must train those moves because your central nervous system and peripheral nervous system must learn how to execute that move. You can't do it in pieces. You can't make your quads strong, your glutes strong, all doing different types of things. I'll give you, for instance, I had 2 daughters that were highly into figure skating, very expensive sport.
Yeah.
And we actually had some of the best Olympic trainers in the world. And one of them, I can't remember his name now, but he worked with the Olympic skater, a blonde-haired girl. And I sat down with him. Terry, his name was Terry something. And he subscribed to teaching a skater to do an axel by learning to execute the 3 portions of the axle: the takeoff, the spin, the land. But he said to me, I can get you to do the perfect takeoff, the perfect spin, and the perfect land in isolation, and you'll never do an axle until I teach you how to thread them all together in a continuum. And this is kind of what I'm talking about when we talk about training. And there's a lot of bodybuilders that move heavy weight with isolation movements, and their muscles respond that way. But they may actually be putting themselves at greater risk of injury because they could tear a bicep. You start getting too heavy, these smaller muscle groups. Doug doesn't espouse that. Doug espouses using less taxing weight and amplifying its effect by angles and leverages, which is brilliant. But if your goal is to be able to deadlift 600 pounds, you're not going to be able to train each individual muscle independently and then just get up there and deadlift. You're going to have to deadlift 600 pounds.
Yeah. So much like what I discussed last week, the real key to super strength is learning to contract as much muscle as possible simultaneously.
I call it amperage. So, there's voltage and there's amperage, right? You
Right.
could have 120 volts and a couple milliamps, and you can't even light up a light bulb. But you take 120 volts and you put 5 or 6 amps into it, and you can electrocute a human being into death, right? So
Yeah.
activating a muscle is like voltage.
Yeah.
Activating lots of muscles takes amperage, and that is collateral adaptations to the nervous system that make it allow it to focus on 12 different muscle groups and stimulate them at the same time. That's amperage.
Yeah. And that's just been my goal and my shtick throughout life. It's not everyone's. And I'll listen to his stuff and I'll tell you why. There may be a place for it where somebody like me spends his entire life doing big compound lifts and trying to get stronger and stronger. But look, there are no 80-year-olds squatting and deadlifting 500 pounds in gyms.
Right.
There's a reason for that. And so, is it plausible I switch over to this at some point to maintain?
I agree with you.
Right? So
depends on your goals change. Like I said, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Your goals change.
Right.
So Rusty Brooks says, what's your take on megadosing beta-alanine? Itchy. I saw an article saying that 6 grams a day might not be enough, and I want to get the most out of it I can.
Yeah, interesting thing here. A couple things that I noticed recently. Most major companies with a beta-alanine only product have dropped it. And I have to believe that's because people don't think, right, that it's working or it warrants the expense, even though it's not terribly expensive. Where it does show up a lot is in people's pre-workouts, and in no small measure, because the company realizes that you get the tingles. Well, it must be doing something, right? So we still have these questions about beta-alanine, and this one is certainly valid. What about megadosing it? My opinion on megadosing is this: it would be a very bad thing to do. Now, let me tell you why. Because I learned the hard way on this one. I dosed 10 grams a day or more around about a year ago, and I quickly regretted it. Why? because I started having heart palpitations, or maybe more accurately, my heart was skipping beats. And so I do a little more research, and it turns out that very high doses of beta-alanine displace taurine, which, among many other things that taurine does, taurine's also responsible for regulating heart rhythm. Now, interestingly enough, you can do the same thing to yourself by taking too much vitamin D. Now, in all fairness, it takes probably 20,000 IU a day or more for long periods of time. But when you take too much of it, it affects calcium dynamics in your body, which also, of course, are responsible for regulating heart rhythm. Your heart skipping beats is a scary thing, very scary. At least it was for me. And it doesn't. Here's the thing with those two products too, it doesn't stop the day that you discontinue beta-alanine or vitamin D. It takes days, and in some cases weeks. So just understand that. Don't start taking it again thinking, well, gee, that didn't work. It must be something else. With beta-alanine in particular, you need to understand the dynamics of how it's incorporated into muscle tissue, and how long and how much and yada yada. Now, as an example, as a benchmark, creatine increases phosphocreatine levels dramatically in a relatively short period of time, a month or less, sometimes just a week or two, depending whether or not you decide to front load it. Beta-alanine, however, is a different animal. Studies show that muscle carnosine levels are still rising at the 12, 16, and even 20-week mark or more. Now, yes, it is a bit faster when consumed with food, and that's because food causes an insulin response. So it's smart, if you're going to take it with meals. But you won't be loaded in just a few weeks like you will with creatine. It works the other way too, by the way, meaning muscle carnosine levels after you discontinue very slowly recede. Months and months and months for those carnosine levels to come down to baseline where you were before you started supplementing with beta-alanine. If you don't want to wait to get the buffering effect, you can experiment with phosphate loading, right? And we know there's been a lot of studies on that, showing much favorable research on it. Although the caution is always there to go slow. Why? Because provided you can get and keep it down, it provides a more acute effect. Yes, buffering hydrogen ions. However, the gastrointestinal issues that you face are going to be, let's say, urgent. Most athletes will only try it once. And I have a sneaking suspicion that any performance enhancement they see, it might not be due to the phosphate loading. I think it might be honestly due to the salt, right? So experimenting with maybe sea salt or a similar version of it around workouts might be helpful to you. A lot of us, because we're in lifting and we're watching our diets, we're on low sodium diets. I'm not a fan. I am not. I think low sodium diets cause more problems than adequate and maybe even high sodium diets. Sodium is a very powerful mineral, right? Just a little bit, and it can increase your bodily stores of water pretty dramatically. And in some cases, that's exactly what the doctor ordered for people. Mm-hmm. And they'll see an increase in strength. So, that's beta-alanine in a nutshell. Don't mega dose it. I would take 3, maybe 5 grams a day, every day with food, and just let it do its thing. You'll be fully loaded in 4 months, 3-4 months, something like that.
The next question comes from Greg Castingway. He says, I know you're a fan of amino acids and fast proteins, especially during workouts. Like a lot of people, I use whey and lots of it. Should I take a scoop before and after my workout? What do you do personally?
Well, first, some clarification about my position on proteins. Provided they have a high biological value, like we discussed earlier, fast, medium, or slow, they all have their benefits and drawbacks. So we need to define, though, particularly for this question, what fast means, at least in the context that he's asking. Milk protein, as most people know, is a combination of whey and casein. And casein lasts for up to 7 hours in your system, right? Slowly, just kind of trickle feeding amino acids. And like casein, whey is a quote unquote intact protein, meaning it's this string, like a ladder, so to speak, of amino acids that still needs to be deconstructed. So fast or not, it's broken down into its constituent amino acids, yes, faster than casein, but it washes out much faster too. At around the 90-minute mark, most of whey's aminos are gone. And it takes sometimes up to 60 minutes to liberate those amino acids for them to show up in the bloodstream. So for intra-workout use, where I think supplements are most helpful, for intra-workout use, you need something faster. And that means either a hydrolyzed protein or free-form essential amino acids. Now, the studies will tell you hydrolyzed proteins are better and faster. I say that after comparing the two and using them and experimenting forever with them, essential aminos are better. Hydrolysates, however you say it.
Hydrolysates. Yeah, I know. I get the same problem.
Hydrolysates that use di and tripeptides may still be faster, but frankly, we're talking a negligible difference. They're both extremely fast. Within minutes, the amino acids will show up in the bloodstream. From my viewpoint, and everything, all the experimentation that I've done, essential aminos recover you better, which is a consequence, in my opinion, of being far easier to manipulate the ratios of each amino acid. And even if you get a stock essential amino acids formula, which conforms to the National Institutes of Health recommendations, you will recover faster than using a hydrolyzed protein. Back to the ratios. The ratios, as I said, can be manipulated, and the ratios matter. And if you don't believe that, I'll read these conclusions to you of just one study that the researchers did on EAAs. The composition of the mixture of essential aminos we have tested in this and previous studies was originally based on the composition of muscle protein. However, changes in concentrations of blood amino acids after ingestion may be caused by different clearance rates of individual amino acids. Here's the important part. Therefore, adjustments in the composition of the drink could further improve the net muscle protein balance response. And in fact, if you follow the latter studies after this one, which was published, I think, in 2010, they did in fact achieve better numbers with a different amino acid sequence. Now, with protein hydrolysates, it is technically possible to create different amino peptide combinations via hydrolysis. I think in the old days, they would use an acid wash. Today, they use some sort of enzyme bath. However, that's beyond the ability of the average person, right? One would need the necessary lab equipment and frankly, a chemistry degree to figure out how to do that. And even then, the process results in a lot of proline residues, which are what gives hydrolyzed proteins its very, very bitter taste. Even the best supplements won't work if they taste so dreadful you seldom use it. Even if you do use it consistently, and I've used hydrolysates sourced from casein, from whey, from salmon, and believe it or not, from silk cocoon protein. which was hydrolyzed down to an average molecular weight of between 90 and 150 daltons. By way of comparison, the previous benchmark for low molecular weight was 250 daltons. So if anything was going to work, it was going to be this stuff, right? 90 and 100, between 90 and 150. Let me save you some money along with your taste buds. None of the hydrolysates that I've used do what essential amino acids do. And by that, I mean a proper blend of them. So here's the bottom line. Few people can afford, especially nowadays, few people can afford, a half a dozen different speed proteins or the lab equipment to create custom di and tripeptide blends. So if you want to maximize your results, do these two things. Number one, sip on essential aminos just prior to and in between your sets. And immediately after training, have a scoop of Thrive, which is by far the best casein whey mix plus extra essential amino acids, plus extra glycine, et cetera, et cetera. You mix that and a little bit of heavy cream post-workout. That is the absolute best that you can do based upon the information that we have and the products that we have today. And I guarantee if you do use it, you will see and feel the difference almost immediately.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we have the BluePrint tip of the day. You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned. We shall return.
When craving a snack, reach for Select Savory Snack Sugar-Free Biltong, the healthy alternative to sugar-laden beef jerky. They use a fattier cut of beef, making it more tender and flavorful. For mealtime, choose from their 63 seasonings, which are sugar and additive-free. From chipotle rub to savory pumpkin spice, you'll find an option to suit your palate. Go to shrnetwork.biz/SSS today. Use code SHR15 to save 15% on any meat snack or seasoning. Savor the flavor today.
By now, you're aware of the cognitive benefits of nootropics. My friends over at Pure Nootropics are giving my listeners 10 to 30% off their already great prices on over 70 high-quality nootropics. Stock up on DHM so you can feel good after your holiday celebration, or try the Superhuman Stack to boost your brain and energize your day. Go to shrnetwork.biz/pure, that's PURE, and start saving today. Getting a massage post-workout is a proven strategy to facilitate better recovery. Getting to massage therapists can be difficult and expensive, especially in these times. The solution is the Meteor, a heated massage ball from Milestorm. Reduce pain and soreness and expedite recovery with the Meteor's research-backed vibration settings and therapeutic heat. It's convenient for travel and works on any body part. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Meteor and use code SHR15 for 15% off and free shipping if you buy 2 or more. Start recovering better today.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said that all disease begins in your gut. That's why it's so important to protect yourself with boosted immune system. If you drink coffee, tea, smoothies, or really any beverage in the morning, and you're looking for a tasty way to start your day and defend yourself against harmful bacteria, then I have just the thing for you to try. It's called the Ultimate Immunity Protection Stack, and it was put together by my friends over at Bioptimizers. Their immunity stack has 3 products which contain over 18 natural herbs and probiotic blends formulated to fight and eliminate bad bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and repair compromised gut lining. It also includes psychobiotics, which help increase serotonin and happy chemicals, naturally elevate your mood, performance and cognitive function with no side effects or dependency. It's a great addition to your morning routine, and it tastes amazing. Just stir it into any beverage, sip, and enjoy. It's the ultimate way to boost your immune system right before the holiday season. Go to shrnetwork.biz/protect and use code SHR10 and save an extra 10% off on it. You won't find this deal or stack anywhere else. Fast shipping and the best deal. Go to shrnetwork.biz/protect.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Later in the show, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is glyphosate. There appears to be some transgenerational epigenetic effects. This study comes out of a university that I'm very, very fond of, the great land grant University of Washington State, where a lot of this good information comes out from. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that, because, you know, we've been told for better part of the past 8 or 9 years, at least, that the glyphosate is completely safe. You can drink it by the glass. It's fine. So, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But before we do that, we have Rob Regish's blueprint tip of the day. What's the blueprint tip of the day, Rob?
Tip of the day has to do with the merits of planning and resilience. And, you know, this might not be the most happy-go-lucky conversation to have, but we need to have it, because I was contacted not that long ago by a guy I know. I've known him for a while. Great guy. I mean, just, you know, hardworking guy, doing everything that he can to provide for his family. And he got hit bad. And I'll go into it here quickly. But yeah, today's tip has to do with planning, and more accurately, Carl, as you once said, being resilient. Now, I'm not sure if my plans are just that bad or what, but I've had to fall back on plan B more than once in my life. And so that means either plan A didn't work, or more likely it wasn't adequate, versus the circumstances that I was faced with. And if you don't think this applies to you, think again. Because whether it's a plateau you hit in the gym, a divorce that comes at you from out of nowhere, or job loss, or COVID closes your gym and now you got nowhere to train, you need to have a plan and to be resilient. Some problems are so severe, or so many hit at once, just surviving is winning. Just getting up the next day is winning. For some reason, I seem to know from an early age that at some point in my life, some terrible things were going to happen. And so early on, I built walls, right, that would protect me. First, I built physical walls, meaning I built myself up to be as big and strong as possible. And, you know, hoping that would deter any potential problems. Later on, I learned how to fight, and that obviously goes hand in hand with it. But I also, in retrospect, I built financial walls, reasoning that if I had this big pile of money, that would see me through a job loss, which is something that I really, really feared, right? I mean, who doesn't? Little did I know, you know, job loss, divorce, rhabdo, and unfortunately, as you know, a suicide in the family, more than one, and even worse, would hit all at once, pretty much. I for sure didn't think that those things would last for years, and even, right, get worse as time went on. In retrospect, I'm glad that I built those walls, because if I hadn't, I don't know if I'd be here today. If I was still here, I wouldn't be in nearly as good shape. Let's put it that way. I don't wish any of that on anyone, even my worst enemy. What I do wish is that you take the time to plan today, to build today, and build some of your own resilience. That could be greater physical strength, right? Yeah, I have a feeling everybody listening is already doing that. But there's also mental and emotional strength to make it through the difficult times. It might mean you start saving a little money and you start an emergency fund. And you need to do those things because I'm here to tell you that with few exceptions, nobody is going to help you when hard times hit. This is something that took more out of me than even some of the events that I was confronted with. Prepare yourself now for good friends, maybe even your spouse, your employer, and family members to turn their back on you when you need them the most. And I'll tell you now, I am still very angry about that. It is sad to know that there are people out there like this, but truth be told, the world is full of them. Now, on the other side of the coin, you're going to meet some great people that stand by you and do everything they can to help you, some of which who don't even know you really well, and Carl and Orr was one of those. So understand it won't all be bad, and hopefully you'll run into a Carl and Orr of yourself when the tough times hit. So look, I hear and see it all the time, and it's just going to get worse with COVID. Why? Because a lot of people are losing their jobs. That's going to put a lot of pressure on their relationships and marriages, and sadly, their families. And like I said earlier, I had somebody write me recently. I can't even begin to tell you what a good guy this is. And he was completely blindsided. He came home one day and there was a note. There was a piece of paper on the kitchen table from his wife saying, "So sorry, I took the kids and I'm going to split." All right. It left him with nothing. Actually, it's less than nothing, because now he's going to have to pay for an attorney. And, if family court is anything like it used to be, they'll probably mandate that he pay some obscene amount of child support, even when he doesn't have his job, because he lost his job too. So, it won't be long maybe before they're threatening him with jail time, if he doesn't pay something in alimony. So you see how this works? 1 minute your life is going along as planned, but then disaster strikes. Don't think it can't happen to you, because one of the first things this guy told me was, "You know what? I listened to you on SHR talk about saving money or getting ready or having a plan." He said, "I had no warning she was going to do this." And he said, "I never saved a dime. I lost my job." And now he's using credit cards to pay for his attorney bills. That's going to have a long tail on it, folks. It's really going to hurt on many different fronts before he's whole again. But he will be whole again, and hopefully with the help of some good people, like I said before. There's an old saying that goes like this: you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. And that was true 100 years ago. It's true today, and it's going to be true 100 years from now. So start building resilience today, whether that means saving $10 a week, stocking up on essentials maybe for COVID-20, God forbid if that happens, or continuing to build your biceps. You can never invest enough in plan B and being resilient, because you never know when you might need it. And so, yeah, I mean, like you and I, Carl, right? We went through something very similar, and it's sad, but the stats are what they are. What is it? 70% of marriages end in divorce.
75 now.
Oh, I remember when it was like 50 or 60, and I'll be honest, I never thought I'd get divorced, but boom, there I was.
Well, and like you said, with what's going on right now with COVID and job losses and just the general stress of the election and all the drama that's really created by people outside of our little circles of life, that bleed into our circles of life. People are more stressed now than ever before. Suicides are through the roof. I mean, you know, it's really a sad statement, because I don't believe government really cares. They act like they care. They're almost like an extension of Hollywood in that they act a certain way, but the policies they put in place aren't really designed to truly help people. And it's a sad situation right now. There's a lot of people under a lot of stress. You know, I'm fortunate, but I'm not lucky. I have put 15 years into this show. I showed up when nobody else would. We're going to have our 15th anniversary show this Friday. You know, I mean, you just got to keep working and building your game, and don't worry about what's going on around you. That's really the answer to everything. That's true of business. It's true of life. It's true of relationships. You got a good partner in the world. Focus all your energy on her. Have her focus all her energy on you. You don't need everybody else out there. It's true.
Yeah. And just know that however bad it is, when you come out the other end, you know, look at me. I met the most wonderful woman in the world. Right. And she makes my life wonderful. I would have never met her, right, if all that crap didn't happen.
Yeah. And that's the way to look at it. And even though that is the way to look at it, because that's an optimistic view, not a pessimistic view. Pessimistic view will never take you far in life. Just one more time, let's go ahead and plug the current offer. So if you want to take advantage of the BluePrint Bulletin, you can get 3 months for $14.99. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Coach Rob. Use code SHR5 and see what you're missing. Don't forget to check out the special bonus fat loss guide, especially for these holidays. You're going to need it. Rob, thanks for being here today, brother.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take one quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something very, very near and dear to my heart and very serious, and you should be listening with complete attention. Stay tuned. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carbs, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. By now, you're aware of the cognitive benefits of nootropics. My friends over at Pure Nootropics are giving my listeners 10 to 30% off their already great prices on over 70 high-quality nootropics. Stock up on DHM so you can feel good after your holiday celebration, or try the Superhuman Stack to boost your brain and energize your day. Go to shrnetwork.biz/pure, that's P-U-R-E, and start saving today. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. Getting a massage post-workout is a proven strategy to facilitate better recovery. Getting to massage therapists can be difficult and expensive, especially in these times. The solution is the Meteor, a heated massage ball from Milestone. Reduce pain and soreness and expedite recovery with the Meteor's research-backed vibration settings and therapeutic heat. It's convenient for travel and works on any body part. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Meteor and use code SHR15 for 15% off and free shipping if you buy 2 or more. Start recovering better today.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk and crunchy crumble is custom made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back to Superhuman Radio. We're joined by Dr. Michael Skinner from the University of Washington State University, a fantastic university that I applaud because they produce some of the best research as it relates to chemical pesticides and herbicides. And today we're going to talk specifically about glyphosate or Roundup. Many of you have heard in the media the past 4 or 5 years about glyphosate on both sides. You know, you have the scientists say, oh, it's completely safe, you can drink it by the glass. Then you have other people who say all sorts of horrible things about it. And obviously, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle, but this research is even more fascinating to me. Welcome to the show, Dr. Skinner.
Thanks very much.
So why this study? First of all, this particular study, you looked at the transgenerational effects of glyphosate. Why? I mean, was this just a natural next progression in looking at this chemical compound, or were there some things that you saw in the literature that said, wait, we need to see how far this goes down the line?
Sure. So about 20 years ago, we discovered this concept where an environmental exposure or toxicant could actually influence an individual and change their sperm or egg, and that gets passed to the next generation and subsequent generations. And so this is it's through a process called epigenetics, which is not a genetic change in the DNA sequence, but it's small chemical modifications around the DNA that actually can change how the DNA functions. That's epigenetics. So what we just described is an epigenetic transgenerational inheritance. So this truly is a non-genetic form of inheritance. It's how biology is influenced by the environment. So the environment can change things without changing the DNA sequence to change phenotypes, promote disease, or promote wellness, depending on what the environmental sort of things are. So this has been going on for 20 years. We've looked at 16 or so different environmental toxicants, everything from DDT to fungicides to so forth. And the recent one we looked at because a couple of years ago we looked at glyphosate initially because it's currently in our current generation, and actually for the past generation, is one of the major environmental exposures we get. Okay. And so we wanted to find out if glyphosate would actually promote things generationally. So that's what we did in 2019. And we showed that glyphosate actually promotes transgenerational disease events. So what it is the individual exposed isn't so much affected by the glyphosate. So in essence, what they've been saying that glyphosate is relatively safe is not completely incorrect. In terms of most chemicals out there, it is relatively safe for direct exposure.
Right. It's not acutely toxic.
Correct. So it doesn't impact, if you're exposed, it's not going to affect you that much. But it can change your sperm or egg such that you're going to pass that to your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so if you look at disease in the subsequent generations, where we did in a rodent model, we see dramatic increases in disease in the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. When there's no exposures, essentially you're passing this epigenetic change in your germline, your sperm or egg, to subsequent generations. So we call this generational toxicology. In other words, it's not so much the direct exposure where everybody looks today, it affects the future generations. And so essentially what it means is it's relatively safe for today's exposures, individual direct exposure, but we really didn't know previously that it could be affecting our great-grandchildren and dramatically increasing their disease onset. Everything from obesity to heart disease to prostate disease, reproductive defects, the whole gambit, these were affected in these transgenerational animals. So in the current study, what we showed is we actually can analyze the individuals and identify which diseases they may be susceptible to get. So because this has now been exposed since 1990, We have this programming in our genome, and we're going to potentially pass it to our grandchildren. What can we do about it? We may not be able to fix it because it's already happened.
Right.
So what can we do about it? So this study shows is we can actually look at the epigenetics of your DNA in your sperm or egg or other cell types to give a diagnostic to say what disease later in life you may be more susceptible to get. Then, by knowing that's the case, preventative lifestyle changes and or therapeutics can be put in place to delay or prevent the onset of that disease. So this gives this first hint that for these types of problems that have been programmed from all these generations of exposures into our genome, we might be able to use this newer technology for epigenetic diagnostics or biomarkers to actually try to develop a better preventative medicine in the future.
Okay, a couple questions that are just bouncing around in my brain. The first one is the time of exposure as it relates to the production of offspring. So is it if you've ever been exposed to glyphosate, or is it if the exposure is occurring when you are fathering that child?
So we study the most sensitive time for exposures for any organism is during fetal development, embryonic development. So when the fetus is developing in the gestating mother, most organ systems are starting to develop, and that's when they're most sensitive to environmental insults. So we actually do the exposure on a gestating female, and this gets passed for generations to come. Okay?
Gotcha.
However, lots of different labs, including our own, have looked at adults, preconception adults, in other words, adults that when exposed, they can change their germline epigenetics as an adult, and then that can actually get passed as well. Things like caloric restriction or high-fat diets, things like this will actually promote those generational effects,
right,
subsequent generations from adult exposures as well. So the most sensitive period is during fetal development. The next one is early postnatal, right after birth. The next one is during teenage years, pubertal development. And once you become an adult, you're generally less resistant to your personal effects from these exposures, but it can still affect your germline.
So it's not like, oh, I was exposed in these 3 different periods of time, but then I cleaned up and removed it all from my body, and now 3 years later, after it's been removed, I'm going to have a baby. It's still a dominant effect, epigenetic.
Right. The programming in the germline can become permanent throughout the rest of your life. And so essentially, the way that works is males have what are called spermatogenic cells that make sperm, and these spermatogenic cells have a stem cell. If you change that stem cell spermatozoa, then those are the cells that replenish all the sperm that are made constantly throughout your life. So if you change that cell, it's permanent. You're gonna
you just changed the blueprint in the factory, basically.
Correct.
So we've talked about epigenetics on this show for a very long time. In fact, we've even had a couple epigenetic testing groups. One out of called Chronomics out of the UK. They are testing over 2 million data points on the DNA, epigenetically on the DNA, and so we always talk about epigenetics from an unwanted passive effect. Like I interviewed one of your colleagues many years ago about DDT and sperm line, changing. We've talked about epigenetics on this show from a variety of different reasons, but it's always epigenetic bad. The epigenetic change have bad outcomes. Surely we can figure out how to harness epigenetics and maybe do things to unwind the bad things. Shouldn't we be able to do that?
Absolutely. So you have to understand, previously, for the past 100 years, we thought the DNA sequence, just the DNA sequence, was the secret to life. That basically everything was determined from the sequence itself, okay? It turns out that the sequence itself can't really do much. Even though there's genes and things in this sequence, the way that those are regulated is through epigenetic marks on the DNA will turn genes on or off to give you different cell types and so forth. So normal biology uses epigenetics for normal development, your maturation, your phenotypes that you have. Everything is really controlled through this environmental epigenetics and how it's affecting the genetics. They all work together. And so essentially normal biology, everything you can think of that's good, is then just as much due to epigenetics as it is genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we have some environmental toxicant, high-fat diets, caloric restriction, these are sort of abnormal environmental sort of things, then you shift the epigenetics, and most of those shifts will then promote some abnormality in the normal developmental process. So all you've done is it's more the environment that we need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a bad environment, it's going to promote these physiological effects like disease onset. It's not due to the epigenetics intentionally doing it. It's just part of the conduit on how this works. Okay.
So it's interesting because I did a show with Joel Green, brilliant guy, earlier in the year, where there's this all of these new diets, the keto diet, the obviously fasting has become a very big thing, restricted calorie diets, and after reading some of the research, I thought, let's say there's a husband and wife. They're really into intermittent fasting and keto. They're checking their blood ketone levels every day, and they're getting deeper and deeper into keto. Mm-hmm. And they're just thrilled about it because within their community, they're just superstars. And they happen to get pregnant.
Correct.
That baby is going to be imprinted with the genetics of a baby that's coming into a world that is not abundant. This baby probably will have higher degree of thrifty genes because the baby is coming into a world where the mother and father are starving all the time.
Absolutely.
So you just validated that is a truism because if you're starving yourself so that you can be the king person in your diet community, and I always say if your diet comes with an annual cruise and a membership card, you're doing it for the wrong reason. But it's like you are doing some really, really big things to the offspring that you're going to have someday. And so even diets have epigenetic effects.
Correct. So for example, years ago, well, about 5-6 years ago, what we showed was if we did the same type of experiment I just showed you or just discussed with DDT. So we actually hit it with DDT. 3 generations later, the great grand offspring, 50% of the population, both males and females, developed obesity. Such that essentially, depending on what the environmental factor is, it can promote relatively specific phenotypes. For DDT, estrogenic type substances, it promotes obesity. So if you have a caloric restriction situation, what you're doing is you're promoting the thrifty phenotype, which you just mentioned. What it is your offspring have the capacity to now live on less calories. But if you
because they're assuming that's the world. Yeah.
Right. If you give them normal calories, they have a susceptibility to develop obesity, and that gets passed to their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren as well. So if the pregnancy issue is really the critical one, if you're going to have a child, you have to think about what your germ cells seen. So if you actually reprogram it for most of your life because of these caloric restricted diets, if your child is not on a caloric restricted diet, they will have a susceptibility to get obesity.
Yes.
So we have to be more conscientious about our environment. It's not just a built-in program thing like we used to think about it for the past 100 years, like genetics. The environment can actually dramatically influence its epigenetics, and it can reprogram that genetics very quickly. This is how evolutionary biology works. This is how this new phenomena of non-genetic inheritance impacts every area of biology, not only where disease comes from, but how evolution works. And we didn't really know about this until very recently. So it's not that the genetics isn't really important. It really is. We can't live without it. But it's really the epigenetics working with the genetics is how biology works. So this is a normal process. And if we shift now the environment to a bad environment, either caloric restriction or whatever, you're going to shift the epigenetics and it's going to reprogram things. Then, because it's reprogrammed, and if it gets into your sperm or egg, it's there. In plants, they've shown this phenomena is permanent. It goes 100 generations. A heat exposure of a plant has been shown to actually change the flowering phenotype And that was passed through an epigenetic process for over 100 generations. So this becomes relatively permanently programmed. So what this paper that we're discussing shows is we can now use the epigenetic changes as biomarkers to give us a better predictive capacity to know what abnormalities might develop later in life, and we then can actually take a preventative approach medicine-wise to prevent them, which is much easier than.
What were there were a couple very, very common disease outcomes to the glyphosate exposed epigenetically changed offspring. Prostate cancer.
There was prostate disease, kidney disease, and testis disease, infertility in the males. Those were there were three most prominent, basically. But the highest population actually had multiple diseases. It's not just one. It's actually, you get multiple.
That's tough then. When you have multiple diseases like that, it's very tough. The body isn't functioning right at all. Who knows what the downstream diseases that occur from those are, right? If your kidneys aren't functioning, your liver's probably not functioning either.
So the take home is the glyphosate, the way they designed it, the way that it's classically tested for toxicology, shows that it is relatively safe compared to many other exposures. But what we didn't realize is all these exposures, including glyphosate, promote generational impacts. And so now what we don't do anywhere out in the world right now is test for generational impacts of compounds like glyphosate. So we need now to step back and start analysis of these generational impacts to know, even though it may not be harmful for us to get exposed, if it's harmful for our grandchildren, it's just as bad to think about. Mm-hmm. So that generational toxicology needs to start to be addressed. And right now, we don't do any testing anywhere in the world for that concept.
So I had a scientist that was with a think tank. I can't remember his name, Anthony something. Anthony Samsel, I think his name was, if I remember correctly, 4 years ago on the show, that his group had discovered that glyphosate is a synthetic glycine, and the body doesn't really know how to break it down the way it does glycine. So it accumulates in tissue, and it causes a phenomenon called amyloidosis. One of the first studies his group published was the unusual phenomenon of amyloidosis of the heart, which leads to heart failure. And they indicated that it was because the body thinks it's glycine, incorporates it into tissue, but when it comes time for for tissue turnover, autophagy, organelles doing their job, they look at it and they go, well, we don't know what to do with that. We'll just leave it there. And they just build new tissue over it. And so, but now you're saying that some of these transgenerational epigenetic effects may be because it mimics some hormones, like maybe estrogen. It seems like everything seems like BPA, everything mimics estrogen. It seems like. Good. Talk about that.
No, I mean, essentially, not all, but probably, I guess, between 30 to 40% of all environmental chemicals have usually what are called an endocrine disruptor effect. Mm-hmm. It's an androgen receptor, an estrogen receptor. It's some hormone system gets abnormally influenced. Either it's inhibited or super stimulated or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so the hormone system, these endocrine disruptors, and that's what they do, is they disrupt the endocrine system. They are the ones that are probably more active in promoting these sort of disease phenotypes. But glyphosate is really not a hormone-like substance. It doesn't really interfere like an endocrine disruptor. We don't really, in a mammal, know what it's doing per se. All we know is that there are with direct effects, there are a couple little things coming on, but for these transgenerational things, clearly the germline is being affected by the glyphosate to change its normal epigenetics. So the epigenetics, that's the chemical modifications that are supposed to occur, either don't occur or there's too many, such that the end result is you have a germline that has a shifted epigenetics, so that the offspring and grand offspring and so forth now have the ability, or it'll promote them to have a disease susceptibility. It doesn't really promote the disease, it's just the susceptibility. You have to understand in disease etiology, if someone has a susceptibility to get obesity, on the same caloric content that you might take, if they take that same caloric content, they will develop obesity and you won't. So disease often is a susceptibility issue. And many things like diet and exercise and so forth will actually shove it one way or the other as to whether you get the disease onset. What this epigenetics is doing generationally is shifting that susceptibility index. So these individuals now have a higher susceptibility for it based on their diet and exercise and so forth. Okay.
So the microbiome is a fascinating new area that more and more scientists are starting to incorporate into their own work to see what role it plays in the outcome of diseases. And in the area of glyphosate, the reason it was considered safe is because humans don't have a shikimate pathway in our tissue, but we have microbes in our gut that respond to glyphosate.
Sure.
So I wonder if you could also look at the microbiome diversity of the parents and the offspring to see if there is a signature in those versus wild type mice that weren't exposed and haven't had epigenetic changes.
No. What you would say is, let's say we have a population with a certain type of microbiome, bacteria and viral sort of components in your digestive system. If you expose them with glyphosate, would you shift that because of the glyphosate exposure? So I'm not aware of a study that's directly done that, but because of that shift, there are physiological impacts of the microbiome that you could actually change. What we're talking about is more a direct effect of the glyphosate on the actual germ cells or supporting cells for the germ cells to shift its normal biology and epigenetics.
Okay, not translated through the microbiome.
No, right. But you could potentially alter that microbiome through the direct exposure. If that happens, it would just be in that individual. If you change your diet, if you're no longer exposed, it might simply recover or something. Those are things that haven't really been looked at that I'm aware of.
I'm going to put this question up, but you are not a virologist. I assume you're not. And obviously vaccines are a lightning rod right now. But Robert Thompson is asking, can a vaccine like the coronavirus vaccine affect epigenetics? And I would imagine everything. If diet can affect epigenetics, I'm sure vaccines can as well.
Correct. The immune response that you have during infection is a different physiological state that can affect a number of different things. Although it hasn't been shown with a virus yet, with some communicable diseases, mostly parasites and things, those have been shown to cause enough of a change in the individual to change the epigenetics of the germline and promote that transgenerationally. So viral infections are likely to do the same thing, but the direct data for that has not come out to show that you can actually change the germline epigenetics. And for generational stuff, that's the critical thing. Only the sperm or egg pass anything to the next generation.
Right.
For the individual, however, it's a big deal. If you are young, this is why an individual that's with the coronavirus is, let's say, the age of 1 or 2 or 5 or something like that, and they get infected, because many organ systems are still in development and undergoing epigenetic changes, the simple existence of that infection can shift those things, whether that's going to impact their heart later on or their brain later on or things like that. Those are studies that have, I believe are in process, but haven't really been published or anything. But I suspect that younger generation individuals will be more responsive to have these changes, such that later in life they'll have diseases associated. As adults, we won't have that because everything's already developed. So when we get infected, it may influence the transient infection period, but it won't necessarily permanently shift organ systems because we've already got them developed. It's the younger children and certainly fetus and so forth that are most sensitive to the potential coronavirus effects.
We're talking about one chemical compound in the environment today. And as you know, and as your university has spent a lot of time identifying, there are literally hundreds of these chemical compounds in our environment today. And many of them have transgenerational epigenetic effects, sadly. Do you ever feel hopeless for being in the center of all this information? Do you ever think to yourself, wow, we have really effed ourselves?
Well, to a degree, that's why we're doing the studies we're doing now. In other words, showing like today in the publication that was just published, that we can actually use epigenetic biomarkers to diagnose the susceptibility to get disease such that we could use preventative treatments to prevent that disease developing. Or recently we found that essentially, if we look at the epigenetics of the sperm, we can tell a father what potentially diseases their offspring may be more susceptible to get as they get older. And so those types of diagnostics will give us the ability to determine that. And so that then down the line, we could use preventative sort of approaches to address the problem. So that's why we're doing this sort of thing. In other words, years ago, we spent lots of time just showing that the phenomena existed. There's little controversy now that the phenomena exists because it's been done by so many different people and so many different systems. But now it is fairly doom and gloom. You know, what your great grandmother got exposed to when she was pregnant may be going to give you a disease later in life. What can we do about it? And you're going to pass it on to your grandkids. So what can we do about it? Well, these preventative therapeutics through this epigenetic biomarkers would give us a way to at least treat it. We may not be able to fix it, but we at least can treat it in the future. So that's the way I would view it. Is this particular paper in general is the first step to allow us to get to that future sort of treatment.
So really testing a man's sperm, even if he already had children and he's in his 30s and 40s, could actually help him understand what diseases that lie in his future. And we're talking about histones when we talk about sperm, right? We talk about the histone.
Histones will do the same thing. Like this paper showed, is histone effects in the sperm were a good biomarker. But the main biomarker that most people study and that we study as well is called DNA methylation. It's a methyl group that's a chemical modification of the DNA that basically can turn genes on and off. But in sperm, we have these histone sort of sites that actually could also be used as a diagnostic. And this paper actually is one of the first papers to show that phenomena could potentially exist.
This is fascinating stuff, and at the same time, it just depresses me. Well, I mean, you come into this world, you try to do the best you can, and we know there's things that outside of our control.
Sure.
But think that there's something that your great grandmother did is affecting, like it isn't even her. It's not even a genetic anomaly. It's not like as though she had the gene for this disease. It's just because she worked at a factory and was exposed to this chemical, and then she had children and they had children and you got it. So every decision your ancestors made somehow fall upon you one way or the other.
Correct. That's a different way to think about disease etiology. In other words, why is it 50% of our population in the US has obesity? That susceptibility probably has a lot to do with the 1950s exposure to DDT. And so these generational impacts really can be kind of explain what's going on today. So with this sort of step forward and coming up with epigenetic diagnostics and biomarkers, we might be able to treat the situation.
Yeah, because we'll know about it ahead of time. You'll know that before the disease shows up, you say, oh my God, you have a predisposition for this kidney disease. You know, you need to control these things in your environment. You need to do this. You need to
take a therapeutic that actually would directly address it. Correct.
Right.
The best example is right now, one of our better examples of a preventative therapeutic is tamoxifen. Tamoxifen was a chemotherapy used to treat breast cancer. It isn't really good at treating breast cancer after it develops, but it turns out if you take tamoxifen in your 30s for a couple of years, you can delay the onset of breast cancer by 10 or 15 years later in life. So essentially, it's a true preventative therapeutic. The problem today is we don't know who to give it to. We don't know the woman that's definitely going to get breast cancer. And so it's sort of a mixed sort of bag. With these epigenetic biomarkers, boom, we potentially have a biomarker to say later in life, you have a such and such percentage chance you're going to get this disease. So if you take this therapeutic for a couple of years, potentially you're going to delay its onset. That's preventative medicine that we can't do today because we don't have any biomarkers.
Right. Man, this is interesting. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Dr. Skinner.
No problem. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate the interest.
Take care. We'll have you back on again. We'll keep an eye out for your work. And if you want to keep in touch with Elisa when your group is publishing, maybe someone else that's in your clinic there, just send her an email. We'll get you back on.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
Hey, take care. And that's it for today's show. We have nothing else to talk about. That's fascinating and makes me so sad. It makes me sad because There are so many companies out there selling stuff that's going to harm us, and we just don't even know it yet. And we buy it willingly. And, you know, there's no such thing as protecting the public. I don't even want to get into it. You got to learn to protect yourself, make good decisions. Okay, we have a great show for you tomorrow, too. Friday is our anniversary show, 15 years in continuous production, no small feat. So please show up for that show live. If you want to be memorialized in that, immortalized in that show, you could do one of two things. You can either email me at onair@superhumanradio.net and simply put the year you first started listening and your name. That's it. It's going to be on the screen throughout the whole show. All these names are going to scroll. Or if you want to do a little something extra, take a video with your iPhone wishing the show happy 15th anniversary, and then go to your browser and go to shrnetwork.biz/yourstory and upload the video there, and we'll get it on the air as well. I see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for listening today.